I moved into my apartment about 2 years ago. It was a small two-bedroom unit on the second floor of a building that had maybe 12 units total. Nothing special about the place, but it was affordable and close to my job, so I signed the lease without thinking twice. For the first few months, everything was normal. I barely interacted with any of my neighbors, which was fine by me. I worked long hours at a marketing agency, usually leaving around 7:30 in the morning and getting home close to 6:30 at night. My routine was about as predictable as it gets. It was maybe 5 months into living there when I first noticed something odd. I came home one evening and found a small bag of takeout hanging on my doorknob. No note, no name, nothing. I figured someone had the wrong door and would come back for it eventually. When nobody did, I threw it out. A few weeks later, it happened again. This time it was a bag of trail mix, the kind you'd get at a gas station. Still no note. I asked a couple of people on my floor if they'd left it, and everyone said no. I didn't think much of it. Weird, sure, but not alarming. The thing that actually got under my skin happened about 2 months after that. I'd started dating someone new, a guy named Marcus, and he came over for the first time on a Thursday night. As he was leaving around 11, we ran into a man in the hallway. Older guy, maybe mid-50s, lived a few doors down from me, though I'd never spoken to him beyond a nod in passing. He looked at Marcus, then looked at me, and said, "Guess you're switching up the routine tonight." I laughed it off in the moment, thinking maybe he just meant I usually left for work at the same time every day. But the way he said it stuck with me. Like he wasn't guessing, like he knew. After that night, I started paying closer attention. I noticed his car in the parking lot at strange hours, early morning when I left for work, late at night when I came home. I told myself it was a coincidence. People have irregular schedules. Then one morning, I found a note taped to my windshield. It just said, "You left 12 minutes late today." That was it. No signature. I stood in the parking lot holding that note for a solid minute, trying to convince myself it was some kind of joke. But nobody I knew would do something like that, though. And nobody outside of my building would know what time I usually left. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I left for work 15 minutes early just to break the pattern. When I got back to my car after my shift, there was another note. "Better. Try earlier tomorrow." I filed a police report after that one. The officer took it seriously, but there wasn't much to go on. No camera footage, no fingerprints they could realistically pull off a folded piece of paper. He suggested a restraining order if I could identify who it was, but I couldn't prove it was the guy down the hall. I just knew. I ended up breaking my lease 2 months early and moving across town. I never confronted him, never got proof it was him at all, honestly. Just a gut feeling I couldn't shake and notes that stopped the week I moved out. I still think about those notes sometimes. Somebody, for reasons I will never understand, spent months learning the exact rhythm of my life, down to the minute. And the scariest part isn't that he watched me that closely. It's that I have no idea if he ever did it to anyone else, or if he's doing it to someone right now. My sister Dana lives alone in a rental house on the edge of town, about 20 minutes outside the city. It's a quiet street, mostly older couples and a few families. The kind of place where nothing ever happens. That's part of why what she told me still doesn't sit right with me. It was a Tuesday night, a little after 10. Dana was on the couch watching TV when she heard 3 knocks on the front door. Not aggressive, just 3 even knocks, the kind you'd expect from a delivery driver or a neighbor. She wasn't expecting anyone, but it didn't strike her as odd enough to ignore. She got up, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole first, out of habit more than caution. She said the porch light was on and she could see the whole front step clearly. There was nobody there. She figured maybe it was kids messing around or somebody who'd knocked and walked off quickly. She opened the door anyway just to check and stood there for a second, looking out at the empty porch and the empty street beyond it. Nothing. No footsteps retreating, no car pulling away. Nothing. She closed the door, locked it, and went back to the couch. About 20 minutes later, the knocking happened again. Same pattern, 3 knocks, evenly spaced. This time she didn't get up right away. She sat frozen on the couch, staring at the door, waiting to see if it would happen a third time. It didn't. But when she finally worked up the nerve to check the peephole again, she says she saw a shadow moving away from the door, off to the side of the porch, toward the driveway. Not a person exactly, at least not one she could make out any features of, just a shape passing out of view faster than she felt like a person walking normally would move. She called me right after that, and I could hear how shaky her voice was. I told her to stay on the phone with me and check that every window and door in the house was locked, which she did while I stayed on the line. Everything was locked. Nothing looked disturbed. We talked for almost an hour, and eventually she calmed down enough that we both started wondering if she'd imagined the shadow, if it was just a trick of the porch light and her nerves. I told her to try to get some sleep and call me in the morning. She called me at 6 a.m. instead of texting like she normally would. She said she'd woken up around 4, gone downstairs to get water, and found the front door unlocked. Not broken, not forced. Unlocked. The way it would be if someone had turned the deadbolt from the inside. She lives alone. Nobody else has a key. She checked every room in the house, and there was no sign anyone had been inside. Nothing missing, nothing moved, no evidence at all, except for that one detail that made no sense. She moved out 3 months later. She told me she couldn't shake the feeling that whoever or whatever had been knocking that night had eventually let itself in without needing the door open at all. To this day, neither of us have an explanation for the unlocked deadbolt. She's asked me more than once if I think someone could have had a spare key cut without her knowing. I don't have a better answer than she does. All I know is she never heard those 3 knocks again after that night, and she never wants to. When I was 23, I rented a unit at an old apartment building downtown, the kind with creaky wooden floors and a hallway that always smelled faintly like old carpet. It had 4 floors, and each floor had rooms numbered in the teens and 20s depending on the wing. My unit was 214. I didn't notice it for the first few weeks, but one night I was walking down to do laundry and counted the doors out of boredom. 210, 211, 212, then straight to 214. No 213. I figured it was superstition, which isn't unusual in older buildings. A lot of hotels skip the 13th floor entirely, so a landlord skipping a room number didn't strike me as strange. I mentioned it to my roommate, Alyssa, and she laughed and said she'd noticed the same thing on our floor months before I moved in. That apparently, the building didn't have any room ending in 13 on any floor. No 113, no 213, no 313. She said the building manager, an older guy named Frank, got visibly uncomfortable any time someone asked about it, and usually changed the subject. I let it go for a long time after that. It was just a quirky building thing. Until one night about 8 months into living there. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of someone in the hallway outside our door dragging something heavy across the floor. It went on for maybe 2 full minutes, this slow scraping sound moving past our door and further down the hall toward the space between 212 and 214. I lay there completely still, listening, telling myself it was probably just another tenant moving furniture at a strange hour. Then the scraping stopped, right around where the missing room would have been if the numbering had gone in order. Then I heard 3 slow knocks against what sounded like drywall. Not a door, just knuckles on a wall. I woke Alyssa up and we both sat in the dark listening. The knocking happened twice more, with long pauses in between, and then it just stopped. Neither of us went to check the hallway. We stayed in her room with the door locked until it got light out. The next morning, I asked Frank directly about the missing room number, point blank, no dancing around it. He got quiet for a second and told me it was just a building thing from before his time, and that he didn't have any more information than that. I pushed a little harder and asked what was actually in that section of the wall between 212 and 214, since there was clearly space there that wasn't part of either unit. He said it was just ductwork, and told me he had somewhere to be. I looked into the building's history after that, what little I could find. It had been built in the 1960s, and I found one blurry, scanned newspaper clipping from a local archive referencing some kind of incident in the building decades ago. But the quality was too poor to make out real details, and I could never find a follow-up article. Slow, reflective. I moved out about 4 months after the knocking incident, mostly because my lease was up and I didn't want to renew. Alyssa stayed another year after I left. She told me the sound happened 2 more times while she still lived there, always around the same time of night, always the same pattern. Dragging, then 3 knocks, then silence. Whispering, long pauses. Neither of us has ever gotten a straight answer about what's actually behind that wall, or why the building skips the number entirely on every floor. I've thought about going back and asking Frank again, but honestly, some part of me doesn't actually want to know.